Hello, folks. Welcome to the Crime Dawg podcast. I'm your host, Johnny FIORICA, retired detective with the Rochester, New York Police Department after serving 30 years. Sitting alongside me, my trusted co-host, David Simpson, also a retired detective with the Rochester, New York Police Department. Folks, we sit before you today with a ton of experience and a wealth of knowledge in law enforcement. But if you want to check to see what we've done in our past, you can go to our bios on our YouTube channel at Crime Dawg Podcast, or you can check our bios out on our website, thecrimedawgpodcast.com. While you're there, check out our cool merch store. David, welcome to the podcast today, brother.
Happy to be here.
David, we talked about this. We didn't know if we wanted to do one. We talked back and forth. We said, we got to do it. And what we're going to talk about today is the Southern California wildfires. So just to give everybody a background, January 7th, 2025, this past week in Southern California, it may go down as the most destructive wildfire in history with tens of billions and billions of dollars worth of damage. I think they're up to a 10 count today with dead bodies. It's unfortunate. They saw one of the most notorious events happen in Southern California. They're contributing it, as of right now, to three factors. The Santa Ana winds, which come in the fall and the winter every year. They're also attributing it to low humidity, dry vegetation. David, we sit before our audience every week, very honestly, because we are not environmental people nor firefighters. We were law enforcement. We were detectives by trade. So our basis of knowledge on either topic, right, it hovers exactly at zero, which, by the way, we have a guest that we're going to introduce in a couple minutes. But David, what we want to focus on today is the blatant incompetence in the leadership in California, from the top of Governor Newsom all the way down to the LA Mayor Karen Bass. David, who would have thought that we'd have back-to-back podcasts on horrible leadership? Last week, we talked about the New Orleans, Louisiana police superintendent, Ann Kirkpatrick, and her public safety, or her being a public safety risk, and failing New Orleans after that horrific domestic terrorist attack. And now here we are today, ready to talk about what we always deem to be colossal failures, monumental failures in leadership in Southern California. What says you, my brother?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an overly complicated job. The number one job of anyone in a leadership position, whether it be the mayor or the police superintendent, the fire chief, is to keep people safe and secure. I mean, that's the backbone of any society. And that's where we have failed in New Orleans. We appear to have failed in California and LA. We fail here in Rochester, New York with that because people aren't safe and secure, and they certainly don't feel that way. So that's kind of the basis or the foundation of this podcast, really.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Just to start with Karen Bass, let's throw some hard stats at our audience. She is the current mayor. Disgustingly, as I read this, she allocated hundreds of thousands of dollars for, let's listen to some of the topics: social justice art workers, the Gay Men's Chorus, and the Midnight Stroll Transgender Cafe. All while, ready for this? All while cutting a little over 17 million, that's million with an M, out of the fire budget. And all while fire officials are like, whoa, hold on, Mayor Bass. You shouldn't do that because a lot of that money is allocated to fighting fires that are the wildfires in the forests of California. So she did this without even hesitation. And now these same officials that are telling her, oh boy, what's going on, were the same officials and other politicians in LA County that were cheering when firefighters were fired during COVID for not getting the vaccine. This is, David, liberal state leadership, liberal city leadership at its finest.
Yeah, they put social justice issues, if you will, or social issues ahead of safety and security. I mean, that's the bottom line. They took from the pot of money and they took away from the fire department, which is safety, obviously, and they redistributed that money to other things to include the things you mentioned. So right at the top, it's a failure. Your number one job in leadership is to keep your people safe and secure. And they literally did the exact opposite of that. And the worst part is that they had the prior knowledge, both from past experiences of seeing these fires. This isn't like something that is a first-time event.
Yeah.
And they've also had people that have said things, whether it be President Trump or whether it be other individuals, have said you have to prepare for these things and you have to have all your ducks in a row and really work at prevention and how you're going to respond to mitigate how much it's going to spread. And they didn't listen to any of it. They instead funded the gay coffee club or whatever it was.
Yeah, and we're not cheerleading, the people that are hurting right now and losing their property and losing their lives. We are not doing that at all. We are simply pointing out that this is what happens when you vote for these liberal policies and these liberal politicians. This is an exact result, a deadly result of what happens, unfortunately. Well, David, we already explained to our audience that we have zero experience in fires, in politics, and everything else. But today, we have a fantastic guest. We are joined by Sean McCabe. He's a retired firefighter, 28 years, retired in 2019, served as union president of his local. He was also district vice president for the New York State Professional Firefighters Association. He is currently finishing up his third year as representative in the 6th District, which is a legislative district in Greece, New York, which is a suburb just outside of Rochester. Sean McCabe, welcome to the Crime Dawg podcast, my friend.
Golf clap.
Thank you, guys. I'm so honored to be here and sharing this time with you guys, so I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, Sean, you and I talked off camera. You've been listening a little bit off camera. And we're interested. I mean, we're a wide open podcast. We're interested just to get your take. I mean, you can give us a take on the firefighting aspect. You can give us a take on the political aspect. Wherever you want to go with it, Sean. I'm sure our audience would love to hear what you have to say.
I mean, there's so much. And I think Dave hit on it really well in, the political world. As a public official, elected public official, or in a leadership role, your primary responsibility is public safety. And you look at California, and I think you said it, Johnny, in LA, they cut just over $17 million from from the fire department's budget alone. And that's huge. And that was part of like their CERT team funding, some of their backfilling of overtime that they were doing. So that impact we're seeing. And I mean, the fire chief realized that when the budget cut was proposed and said, listen, if you do this, we're not going to be able as a fire department to respond to a large scale event such as what's occurring in California right now. And the fire chief was spot on. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with everything the fire chief has done through this process. However, she went to her officials as a department head, the leader of one of the largest career fire departments in the country, and said, this is a problem if you cut this. And the city government decided to cut and gave it, like Dave so eloquently said, to all these different social justice and other groups, the gay men's course, things like that. The primary focus needs to be public safety, but the problem with politicians in a lot of communities is the first place they look to cut is public safety, law enforcement,
which
fire.
is crazy, Sean.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's absolutely crazy that would be the first. You would think that a budget and stuff would be built around public safety. Fire and police get fully funded, the best you could possibly do it, and then everything else falls after once that's taken care of. And it seems like that's the opposite.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's really sad. I mean, we had a little bit of a case with that, with the county budget this year, is some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanted to cut from the sheriff's department. They wanted to cut from veterans, to give to social programming. And again, our primary focus, as in my opinion, as an elected official at the county, is to provide for public safety. Then everything else falls underneath that. But people want to be safe. And, you look at the impacts when you cut public safety, whether it's, I mean, you guys are both retired from RPD. I think you guys are like 200 officers short of where you should be staffing wise. Fire departments across the country are short staffing. And then everybody complains about the overtime. But the overtime is you haven't filled the positions because you've cut those budgets, and you're playing that dangerous game, which has caught California at this time. I mean, it caught, like you guys so eloquently said earlier, New Orleans last week, where they, took down those barriers because they didn't feel they needed them. And then the car drove through and, hurt and killed all those people on a prime, at the Sugar Bowl. So I think at the end of the day, the huge mismanagement. I mean, Karen Bass, I watched her press conference yesterday and I saw her the day before. I mean, the sheer incompetence in her office is absolutely, it astounds me a little bit that somebody could get elected to that high of a public office, and the incompetence is just amazing to me.
Yeah, it's shocking. And what's even shocking now is you got Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who literally spent in 2024 $23 billion, that's billion with a B, $24 billion on the homeless in California. Now, let's just stop for a second. I am all for helping out American homeless people. I'm all for helping out people that have mental health issues, that are homeless. Everything that surrounds homelessness, I am all for helping. Do I think $24 billion seems a little excessive to me? But you think maybe some of that money could have been reallocated into some of the funds for the firefighters. Guys, one of the things that I want to talk about that Governor Newsom has done, and it's all over mainstream media. Well, some outlets, not all. We know which ones that we're talking about when I say not all. But he limits the water going from Northern California to Southern California. The main reason why in the media outlets are saying that he did this was to prevent a fish, the smelt fish. And he's limiting the water flow down there to the people in Southern California. And by the way, full disclosure with the people in California, they voted and they passed a proposition to retain and capture water and to build reservoirs to capture some of this water so they could be at full capacity in case incidents like this had happened. Not one reservoir has been built, even though they voted on it years ago. This is, again, I'll use my term, colossal failure, Sean. I mean, this guy is just nuts. I mean, you have pretty much heavy rains in Northern and Southern California, or Northern California, that come down. They could be trapping all that water, saving all that water, grabbing that water, building these reservoirs for instances like these. And now here we are with people just fighting for their lives. It is truly, truly disgusting.
Well, and I mean, Johnny, you make a great point, because I read that similar article, or saw that article about the money that was allocated for doing the reservoirs, doing all this infrastructure type work, and none of it's been done. And I think it goes back, like you said, it's been a while. I mean, it's not like it was just passed. It's been several years and nothing has been done. And what amazes me in this situation is from a preparedness standpoint. The Santa Ana winds are predictable. You know it's going to be hot and dry at certain times. You know you're going to have red flag warnings that you're going to have. And I get you have a environmental priority, which sometimes I struggle with personally, but protect your people. When you can, fill the reservoirs, make sure the reservoir is full. So when this situation, okay, we know in January we're going to have our Santa Ana winds, we got to make sure we have the water supply. And they failed. I mean, from a failure standpoint, and you look at the billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of property that's been destroyed, and just people's things, family heirlooms, pictures, schools. I mean, whole communities have lost basically their entire infrastructure or community, whether it's your schools, their fire departments, police departments, have burned to the ground. And it's all basically because California political leadership failed in preparing and being ready for this type of a situation. And can you predict a natural disaster? No, you can't. But you got to be ready in the event you have a natural disaster and be in a situation where you can mitigate it to the best of your ability. And in my opinion, California's failed. I mean, everybody in their leadership, from the state down to the local level, has failed in not voicing the concerns. I mean, in the press conference yesterday afternoon, all they were doing was singing praises of other Democrat politicians instead of saying, we need to look at what we did and fix this moving forward. So when we have the Santa Ana winds next January, we're not in a position like this. How do we do that? And again, I mean, I love fishing. I'm a big wildlife guy. I'm a hunter, et cetera. So I get protecting your wildlife, but people come first. And that's where I think the failure was made. We're worried about a smelt as opposed to, my home or your home or Dave's home, we're worried about a fish. And instead of protecting our families and our property and our community, they failed to protect a fish.
Sean, we can't thank you enough for popping in on our podcast, sharing your professional, personal expertise, both in the firefighter realm and the political realm. There he was, folks. Sean McCabe, 28-year veteran, retired firefighter. And like I said, he served as a union president and district vice president of the New York State Professional Firefighters Association. Sean, thanks for joining us, brother. We appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Big fan of you guys.
All right.
I listen to you every Saturday on Wham and catch the pod on occasion. So I big fan.
All right. Hang on. Just hang on 1 second. We're going to talk to you off camera. Just 1 second. David, so here's the deal.
I just got one take real quick.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want you to wrap this thing up in a bow. Go ahead and wrap it up for us.
Well, it's the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, we know that in some place like Rochester, New York, we don't have wildfires. So would we as a government spend a ton of money and allocate resources for wildfires? Probably not, because it's not really high on our natural disaster priority list, okay, if we're government officials, if you're competent. If you go take California, these are known disasters that almost happen seemingly on a yearly basis, okay? So the preparation has to be done or attempted to be done. If they would have done an ounce of preparation, they did nothing. They did less than nothing. They took away. They didn't even have the system, which is poor, running right without doing anything more. They took away. They took $17 million from the fire department. So that shows the incompetence. And it just shows again that when you're incompetent, you don't even know you're incompetent. Right? There's not so many people that are incompetent at their job and are like, oh yeah, I totally suck at my job. Mm-hmm. They're too incompetent to even realize they're incompetent. And that's what we have here. They did nothing, anything. If you would have done anything, it would have been better. He could have said, hey, I tried to do this or I tried to do that. They can't say anything. They failed on every level. Yeah, and people died and they lost their homes.
Yeah, that's a great take, David. They did fail on every level. And again, it's a sad commentary when we have a podcast that we usually comment on law enforcement items, but today we had a comment on leadership, just like we commented, even though last week's episode, like I said in the beginning of the pod, was about law enforcement. It was more about leadership. And we use the term colossal failures. That's exactly what it is, man. These colossal failures in leadership can't be done. I want to tell and we stress it with our listeners all the time, right? We always say, don't vote the person, vote policies. Don't vote the person, vote policies. You don't necessarily even have to like the person that you're voting for, but if their policies are good for you and your family, vote for them.
And safety and security should be at the top of your list when you vote. Right. You vote for the person that first and foremost you believe is going to keep you safe. Right. Okay? Because without that, we have nothing else. We don't have business. We don't have our lives. We don't have our homes. We don't have anything.
Right. I totally agree. Well, folks, listen, man, if you enjoyed this episode, please click like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. That's at Crime Dawg Podcast. That's at Crime Dawg Podcast at DAWG. If you cannot get enough of David and I, you could tune into our Crime Dawg live show on iHeartRadio. That's the Crime Dawg live show. We are live every Saturday, noon to 1 p.m. You can get it on the apps. You can Google's the iHeart website. Listen to us live there. If you're local in Rochester, flip that radio station to Wham 1180 on your AM dial. You can listen to us there. Folks, thanks for listening to the Crime Dawg Podcast. We hope you stick with us for future episodes. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares?